Welcome to Divine Love Talk with Dr. Parthenia Grant, where we talk about health, well-being, and the love of the divine that exists in all of us. Now, here's your host, Dr. Parthenia Grant.
Hi, I feel so blessed to be back with you every week on Divine Love Talk. This week, I'm very excited and very privileged to bring on today James J. Gormley, who is the author of Health at Gunpoint, and it's all about the FDA's silent war against health freedom. Welcome, James.
Thank you very much for having me on.
Okay, so James, a lot of people are not aware about the practices of the FDA that literally amount to a conflict of interest, because when you have, a title like the Food and Drug Administration, and their job is basically to make sure that our food and our pharmaceutical drugs are safe for consumption, they should be independently funded, or the government should fund them, and there should be no private interest groups or major corporations or pharmaceutical companies or whatever funding this research. And fundamentally, I see that as the big problem with the FDA, but I'm going to turn that over to you
Sure.
and get your viewpoint on that.
Yeah, a good question. The thing is, the FDA is an out-of-control, unaccountable federal agency. It's a law enforcement agency.
Yeah.
And they like to remind us of that. So there are conflicts, many conflicts of interest, and you mentioned one. If you look at the last budget increase that the FDA received, 40% of the budget increase alone came from drug user fees that pharmaceutical companies pay to the agency. So it's clear, even just from the very basic, sort of table, top of the table standpoint, it's very clear where the FDA's bread is buttered.
Yeah.
That's true. So, and there are many other influences too, which I can go into.
Yes, and I'd like for you to do that, because I kind of always look at the big picture of everything. When you look at the FDA, it's really no different than our government in general, which is being funded by major corporations who pay for the lobbyists and who buy out the politicians, and then you have this situation where they owe the people that put them in power, and they can't really look out for the public whom they're supposed to be serving. And it's from the top down. And so when you have a situation that is funded by special interest groups from the very top of the government, the little people like us get lost in the shuffle, and we get hurt big time.
That's correct, and the scary thing about the FDA is, at least with elected officials, you say, or we can say, oh, gee, we'll vote them out next time.
Right.
But with the FDA, they are unelected bureaucrats, so we can't just vote them in or out. We're basically stuck with them, and that's the that's what makes it a particularly intransigent situation, is that it's we have to deal with the power structure that's in place.
Well, and that old axiom by Lord Acton that absolute power corrupts absolutely, I see that in pretty much every structure, from the big macrocosm of the government, or, you can look at the IRS. Good Lord, there's nothing you can do with these people, and they're not accountable to anyone either. And it literally creates a situation where the American people are literally enslaved to these huge governmental entities that, as you said, really are out of control, and the public seems to have no power over them. So, we're going to get to solutions in the last half, but I'd like to start out with what made you interested in writing this book, or taking on this topic at all, because they are they can be gangsters. You got that big gun on the cover of your book. I would imagine it would take a lot of courage to write a book like this.
Well, it's I was editor-in-chief of Better Nutrition magazine for about 8 years, and when I first started there, my first boss, Frank Murray, he's the one who really inspired me in a lot of ways, but to write this book as well.
Okay.
And he wrote the first book like this back in the early 80s called More Than One Slingshot.
Okay.
And that book kind of told this part of the story of the kind of a David and Goliath struggle between the health food market or the health food industry and health food retailers and big government.
Yes.
That kind of told the story up through, say, the beginning of the 80s. And I took it from that point forward, went back further, told more of the story, and brought a lot of other factors into the equation.
Well, I'm very happy to see you taking up that gauntlet. Certainly, the way to change anything is you have to create awareness about the situation, because the general public is not aware that the FDA does not have our best interest at heart when it comes to natural health and natural supplements. And because I was diagnosed with lupus some time ago, I've been on the forefront of natural health, and I remember when I first got started with life extension products back in the 80s, that the FDA was all over them for putting out that information, which I thought was extremely valuable. There's this huge book that they wrote about all these natural supplements that you could use for anti-aging and for all kinds of health problems. And the FDA was relentless with them. And then you kind of fast forward to Kevin Trudeau, who wrote that book, What They Don't. What was the title of it? What they don't.
What doctors.
What they don't want you to know.
Yeah. Don't want you to know. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And wow, the first half of his book, he's talking about all the problems that he has had with the FDA. And then friends of mine who own a major corporation that for years made most of their money off of those clove cigarettes, which are actually healthier than the other cigarettes. They were literally shut down by the FDA, and they spent millions fighting the lawsuit against them. So they are extremely powerful, and anything that is successful, that is good for your health, gets beat down in favor of the prescription drugs that have all kinds of side effects.
Yes, that's correct. And the FDA has been at this since really 1948. There was some sort of basically a court order, a case, Cordell versus the United States, and where the United States, I guess, prevailed against Lillard Cordell at that point. And really, from that point on, the FDA has been has had a vendetta against natural products, dietary supplements, health foods, etc.
Yeah, I know so many cases where literally the government has gone in and put these people in prison and destroyed their lives, and literally they've died as a result of it. It's Ann Wigmore. I mean, you can name them. They were hounded. The woman, Hulda Clark, left the country because of the FDA. Right,
that's a good example. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, so this is a topic that's very close to my heart. But you recently went to Washington, D.C. to try to talk with some of the politicians there. Did you make any kind of headway, you think?
I feel that Jim Turner, who's the chair of Citizens for Health, and I went, had some meetings, very, very fruitful meetings with about 6 senators. 5 of the 6 were actually members or chairs of the Senate Appropriations, the FDA Appropriations Subcommittee. So these are the people who decide how much money the FDA is going to get in its budget and for what it can be used.
Okay.
So these are these were definitely key people to meet. And I would say 5 of the 6 meetings were very very positive.
Okay.
I think we made some good inroads in terms of raising consciousness, as to sort of the background of, problems with the FDA and why they need to scrutinize them much more closely as they're considering their budget. So yeah, I think they were good meetings.
Okay, well that's, I had my fingers crossed for you because we need a little, sunlight over there in the government, shedding a little light of truth and a ray of hope for those of us, for instance, for me with lupus, if I had gone the traditional allopathic route with lupus in the 80s, I would not be here today if I had gone steroids and all of the other anti-inflammatory prescription drugs that many of my friends who had lupus died early on. And I'm, surviving because of natural health and planting an organic garden, and it's a real struggle just getting organic seeds. You've got the chemtrails where they're poisoning the air with the aluminum oxide as you're trying to grow little organic gardens, and the stuff is falling down and onto the plants, and they're very fragile and difficult to keep them healthy. So it's a real struggle just to get organic food that you're trying to grow yourself, not to mention the water. I mean, the very things that we need to survive are at risk because of governmental agencies allowing major corporations to poison our food and our air and our water. I mean, the next thing you know, like everybody's walking around with plastic bottles. I said this, a couple of decades ago, people are going to be walking around with oxygen masks, just because the air is so bad to breathe.
Yeah, it's true. I see more and more people walking around with, those, masks that you put on, the paper mask that, from the, and it's like, wow, do all these people have respiratory infections? Or, I don't know. It's clearly, ecologically, it's a very scary time to have to navigate through the world right now. There's a lot of beautiful things in the world, but it's also a scary time in terms of, government overreach, in terms of corporate control, and however, it's a good time for people to be informed and for people to take action into their own hands at a legislative advocacy side.
Yeah, that's pretty much the only hope that we have. Well, I'm talking to James J. Gormley, author of Health at Gunpoint, about the FDA's silent war against health freedom. What I loved about your book, James, is how you gave the background of all, the history of the natural health movement in the U.S. There were quite a few people that I wasn't even familiar with, although I am familiar with a lot of them that weren't in there. But like the Shakers, that was very interesting. But we'll get more into that after commercial break, some of the historical information that you gave us, and Codex. I definitely want you to talk about Codex and what's happening with that after commercial break. You're listening to Divine Love Talk. I'm Dr. Parthenia Grant with my guest, James J. Gormley, author of Health at Gunpoint. James, what is your website?
My website, well, actually, may I give the Facebook page?
Sure,
it's
of course.
facebook.com/health@gunpoint.
Health at Gunpoint, okay, on Facebook. Great. Okay, we're back with more of Divine Love Talk. I am your host, Dr. Parthenia Grant, and I have a wonderful guest today, very courageous man, James J. Gormley, who wrote Health at Gunpoint, the FDA's Silent War Against Health Freedom. And you can find him on Facebook at Health at Gunpoint. James, we were talking about the historical background that you gave on the book, and I do want to salute a lot of the people that fought and laid down this foundation long before us so that we could become more conscious of natural health and the importance of natural health. And I'm sure a lot of people remember Jack LaLanne. And they don't really, probably the young people today don't associate him with being such a pioneer. But who are the ones that touched you the most as you were doing this research, or impressed you the most?
Well, I think Dr. Benedict Lust certainly, was he kind of bridged the skills of, European natural health and the kind of fledgling American tradition that was starting. And then, Thomsonianism, I think that was a kind of more of an herbal tradition that was founded by a New Hampshire farmer.
Okay.
Eclectic medicine has a very strong Native American background with herbal tradition too, and other schools too. I won't give you a whole laundry list. But osteopathy, chiropractic medicine.
Yeah.
These were all founded with in America, in the United States, and either with Native American influences or other herbalism aspects. So those were certainly. I think that really is something what's unique to the United States, and I think I know for a fact that those herbalism traditions inspired many people to learn more about natural health and to go into their health food stores and read up on the herbal help that they can get through these products.
Well, I know for myself with lupus, I see a doctor of osteopathy, because of the joints and the bones and the inflammation, and a chiropractor. And without those two people, I don't think, I would have been able to make it through the different crisis with lupus. But I've noticed people in general, especially like the people that I work with, the disdain that they have for natural health, and they consider a chiropractor not a real doctor, and a doctor of osteopathy not. I mean, they're medical doctors, that they're not real doctors, and it just strikes me as a lot of ignorance and arrogance in the medical profession. And yet, at the same time, you listen to all these ads on television with these prescription drugs, and, they tell you what they're good for, and then this long list of things that, and most of them cause sudden death, and people will still, take it, and you have to wonder, wow, what is wrong with us that you could, do people just tune that stuff out?
I think people do tune it out, yes.
Wow. Eric, were you going to say something?
Well, I was going to say, I noticed one of the commercials, I believe, I want to say it's for Abilify, but one of the side effects is homicidal and suicidal thoughts. And
right.
I'm thinking, well, I just want to cure my blues.
Right. But it can cause you to be homicidal.
Right. You might kill someone yourself, but other than that, it's good.
I'm amazed that there is no shame in promoting these drugs on national TV. And I know, like, I was in a salon one day, and a lady came in, and she had just gotten diagnosed with lupus, and there was this drug that she was being prescribed that when she was telling me all the side effects, I said, well, you're not going to take that, right? And I don't remember all of them, but they were so severe. She said, yeah, of course I'm going to take it. The doctor prescribed it. And I thought, there's no point in me saying anything to her, because the woman who does my hair knows about how I've gone the natural path with lupus, and she was trying to tell her, maybe you should try to take a natural approach. And I said, no, she's not even going to listen, because people that are, really identified with allopathic medicine, they won't listen to anything you have to say. But
the operation was a success, but the patient died.
Right. And there is a lot, way too much of that, which is very disturbing. So, James, when we come back after commercial break, we're going to have a longer time span, and I do want to go into codex and solutions, things that we can do as, the general public to help do something about the war on health freedom. You're listening to Divine Love Talk on CRN. I'm your host, Parthenia Grant, and I'm speaking with James J. Gormley, author of Health at Gunpoint. We'll be back after commercial break. You can find him on Facebook at Health at Gunpoint.
There are 3 letters in the alphabet that strike terror in most of us.
Okay, we're back with Divine Love Talk on CRN. I'm your host, Dr. Parthenia Grant, and my special guest today is James J. Gormley, author of Health at Gunpoint, the FDA's Silent War Against Health Freedom. James, Eric and I were just talking about the vitamin supplement industry, and there's so much work that needs to be done within that industry. There's so much good that the FDA could be doing in terms of regulating it, making sure that the stuff is organic, that it's safe. And then on top of that, you've got Codex that's coming in, that's been around for a while, because I know I've been following Codex for almost 15 years now, and it really, really worries me, the control that it has. So would you talk to the audience about what Codex is and give them a little background and information, because most people have no idea what it is.
Sure. Well, Codex itself is not necessarily evil to the extent that it was it was created with the best of intentions, really. After World War II, when there was a lot of food insecurity in the world, governments kind of got together and said, we need to have some sort of a system in place, with membership from really all of the United Nations member countries, have some kind of a system in place to facilitate the trade of food and food-related products around the world, so that to reduce food inequality and food access problems that come with that. And so that was the intention. Unfortunately, around middle of the 90s, so this was around 1996, the German delegation to Codex, and mind you, Codex Alimentarius means food code or food law, and that the German delegation came up with this idea in '96 that all vitamins and herbs and minerals should be considered drugs, classified as so. So that set off a massive, really a global outrage among consumers, dietary supplement companies, and the natural products industry, and that battle, or that sort of global unrest really took full steam, I would say, around 2003, 2004, into 2005, when the Codex vitamin and mineral guidelines were discussed. And I was part of a delegation to the trade delegation to the United States in Paris and Rome in 2005, and I had a chance to see it all go down. The guidelines were approved to the detriment of European citizens.
Of course.
And they have very low potency supplements over there, and some ingredients can't even be sold. So that's the situation over there. We have to be very careful that the United States stops going down the road that it's currently saying that it's going to go down, in terms of harmonizing, sort of dumbing down our regulations and laws to match those of Europe. In reference to supplements. I'm sorry.
That is a real concern, James. I know, especially, like for instance with vitamin C, you need at least 3,000 milligrams minimum, a day. And then if you have a cold or you're starting to get sick, I will take like 5,000, minimum, to just kind of boost the immune system. And with Codex lowering the dosage, you would have to take, I don't remember what they are, but they're so low.
I think 50 milligrams, I believe, is the cap, if I'm not mistaken.
Good
50
Lord.
50 milligrams, which is a joke.
I mean, 50 milligrams, how many tablets would you have to take to get to 3,000 milligrams? It's crazy. And so it's an insidious plan to force you to have to buy 10 times, you know, the amount of natural supplements just to get an amount that's actually workable. And it's also my understanding that that Codex wants to lower the daily, what's it called, RDF, something?
Yeah, they have upper level and lower levels, and it's similar to the RDAs.
RDAs,
yeah. Basically, it's really what's sort of recommended, and they've already recommended very, very low levels. And the thing is, Codex is not a what's the word? It's not a regulatory body, but it is referenced by the World Trade Organization.
Of course, and they're powerful.
Exactly. So if they're referencing it as definitive, that really makes whatever guidelines Codex comes out with, it basically gives it the force of law internationally.
Yes. So I was going to ask you, did you research originally, was it a pharmaceutical company or something that got this movement going in Germany, or was it the World Trade Organization? Who was really behind it? Because I'm sure it was someone big.
Well, the rumor has it that there's an international chemical company,
of course,
that whose initials start with the letter B. But basically, the CEO of that company allegedly sat down with the head of the German delegation, and that particular company makes its money, or makes a great deal of its money, by selling nutritional ingredients very cheaply, very poor quality, sort of commodity ingredients, so sort of selling them, you know, as you would sell whatever, just any kind of, you know, widgets, let's say. So it benefits large companies, large industrial companies that sell nutritional ingredients that are of low quality. It would benefit them the most to have very, very low standards. So they said, here's our list of products in our catalog. Here, why don't we make this the Codex list? It's like, oh, okay.
Well, and then they have to sell more of it, and they will make more money. It's really insidious the way, if you look at everything, it boils down to money, power, and control. But there's this other element, and I don't know if you've researched this or not, but this is not a secret, about the World Health Organization and the United Nations being very, very concerned about population control, and them not wanting people to be healthy or to live long because they're concerned that we're overpopulated. Have you done any research on that?
I've heard rumors of that. I mean, unfortunately, what I will say is that, at least in the official principles of the World Health Assembly, which is the body that's above, it's above the WHO, the official principles state, and I'm not going to remember the exact definition, but they have a definition for health where it's not just you know, preventing scurvy and beriberi and deficiency diseases. It goes way above that level of health, where it also means emotional well-being, social well-being, and it takes it all into account in their official definition that they're supposed to be, that the WHO and its other bodies are supposed to be helping nations around the world achieve. So as to, you know, your other question, I mean, there certainly are different rumors floating out there about whether it's those guiding stones in Georgia or various other places, which, you know, which seem scary and.
That's pretty blatant. Those guide stones in Georgia. I mean, they're like real clear.
So yeah, it's. But you know, with all of the stuff going on in the world now, in the Russia-Ukraine border and some of these other things, I hope we'll get to not only 100 years from now, but I hope we'll get to next week.
Right.
With all of the stuff going on in the world right now.
Yeah, there's so many concerns, and you know, Eric and I were talking right before the show about, you know, the people in the spiritual movement don't seem to be as focused or as concerned with health and natural, you know, products and eating well, because they, you know, they kind of have this viewpoint that, oh well, you know, it's just your body and it's going to die anyway, and I'm not afraid of death. But at the same time, you can't really grow spiritually. You can't do anything if you don't have a healthy body, and if you're fighting against all of these poisons, you know, in the air, the food, and the water, and big government trying to prevent you from having affordable natural supplements and organic food, then it just, sometimes it's very arduous. It feels like an uphill battle. So I want to ask you, what was your goal? What did you hope to accomplish by writing the book and getting it out there?
Sure. Well, to know where we are, especially to know where we're going, we need to know where we've been.
Okay.
So that was the starting point as far as wanting to tell what brought us here in terms of the natural health movement, the natural health market that consumers are part of. So, and also to look at the food supply, to look at what's going on with supplements in terms of threats to access and information, but not only looking at threats and problems, but to also point a direction forward and say, look, one of the things that we all can be more empowered, you know, with is to connect with organizations that are very credible, that are on the front lines, really fighting for our health freedom, and keeping us informed about different petitions and campaigns and grassroots efforts that they're doing. And I really mentioned a few of the three of the organizations in the book. Well,
would you point those out now?
Sure. So the three organizations that I really recommend people sign up, you know, for their news, email alerts and what have you, are Citizens for Health, which I'm on the board of, so I want to put the full disclosure there.
Okay, definitely.
And also the Alliance for Natural Health.
Okay.
And the National Health Federation, which is headed up by Scott Tibbs.
Okay.
Those are three organizations. There's plenty of organizations, but those are three that are particularly credible, and they research the you know, before they come out with a campaign, they will research it and give you good information about health and safeguarding our health freedoms and our rights. So that's one big step I think people can take, and that really empowers them and arms them with good information, but also opportunities for informed action.
Okay, and we will definitely encourage people to, I'm sure you keep a lot of information posted on your Facebook, to check out your Facebook for updates. Am I correct?
That's correct. That's correct. And that's, yeah, people can also, I'd be delighted to have new friends, you know, who are looking at what we're doing, to go to the Health at Gunpoint Facebook page as well. That would be great.
Okay, and I also think that, okay, we can make everything really complicated, and there are a lot of organizations out there, like you said, the World Health Organization. You know, they'll say that their mission is this, but you have to really watch what they do and not pay attention to what they say, because there's a lot of Orwellian doublespeak. And so I pay attention to organizations and the actual work product that they do. So there is a lot of discernment and critical thinking that people have to utilize. But I think if we just go back to basics and we keep it simple, and if people will start going back to whole foods, growing their own little gardens in their backyard or on their patio, and literally supporting the people that are producing organic foods, the little farmers markets and maybe little neighborhood co-ops, you know, there's a lot of power in how you spend your money and, you know, who you commune with and who you associate with. I think that could make a huge impact in and of itself which is, I think, why as the consciousness rises more about people growing their own food and becoming more conscious and aware of taking responsibility for their health, you have these organizations that want to ban. I mean, there was at one point, I think Codex wanted to make ginger a drug. and you know, and ginger is so medicinal and so healthy. It's like, okay, so you're going to take our just vegetables and turn them into drugs. So we need a prescription to have vegetables. It's really insane.
It is insane. There are many countries in Europe where you do need a doctor's prescription to get certain supplements over a high potency, or over a certain potency. You'll need prescriptions in some countries. I think Italy, Spain, Portugal, very restrictive supplement regimes over there, or regulatory regimes.
Well, I'm shocked that Europe, which is way more progressive in a lot of ways than we are, that they allowed Codex to get approved. But I know that I was on the forefront in 2000 about Codex, spreading the information on college campuses and signing petitions to get that information out there, and it's sort of like we've been holding back the tide, but they're kind of like Michael Myers, that movie. You know, you think you killed him, you know, and he just keeps resurrecting his ugly little face. And
well, it's funny. Europe is sort of like a Polaroid negative of us in terms of natural health and supplements. Wow. What I mean by that is, so regarding natural health, homeopathy and naturopathy, they're way ahead of the game, and those particular sort of schools of medicine are respected in Europe and are used pretty widely. So that's where they're ahead of us.
Okay.
But in terms of supplements, somehow the big monster pharmaceutical companies in Switzerland and Germany and France, they really pharmaceuticalized and medicalized the whole vitamin marketplace.
Well, that's unfortunate. You're listening to Divine Love Talk on CRN. I'm your host, Dr. Parthenia Grant. We're talking with James J. Gormley, author of Health at Gunpoint. You can find him on Facebook at Health at Gunpoint. We will return wrapping this up after commercial break. Divine Love Talk on CRN. Okay, we're back wrapping this up on Divine Love Talk on CRN. I'm your host, Dr. Parthenia Grant, and I have James J. Gormley, author of Health at Gunpoint, the FDA's silent war against health freedom. So, James, in wrapping